My name is Joyce, I'm 58 years old, and I'm about to tell you a story that will make your blood boil just as much as it did mine. My husband's death left me shattered, but nothing prepared me for what came next. He left my daughter the mansion and millions, while I got thrown into a collapsing shack. And what happened inside that shack flipped our lives upside down forever. Stay with me to the end, and drop a comment with your city. I want to see how far my voice can reach. You know, for 35 years, I thought I knew what love meant. I thought I understood what family was supposed to be. I gave everything, and I mean everything, to my husband Robert and our daughter Sarah. Every morning at 5 a.m., I was up making breakfast, packing lunches, ironing clothes. Every evening, I had dinner on the table by 6 sharp. Every weekend, I was shuttling Sarah to dance classes, piano lessons, soccer practice, whatever she wanted. I sacrificed my dreams, my career, my body, my youth, all for them. When Sarah wanted to go to that expensive private college, I worked double shifts at the diner to help pay for it. When Robert's business was struggling in the early years, I sold my grandmother's jewelry, the only thing I had left of her, to keep us afloat. When Sarah wanted a car for her 16th birthday, I gave up my own car and took the bus to work for 2 years so we could afford the payments on hers. I thought this was what mothers did. I thought this was what wives did. I believed with every fiber of my being that love meant sacrifice, that family meant putting everyone else first, always. I believed that when the time came, that loyalty would be returned. I believed that after decades of devotion, I would be taken care of, respected, valued. God, I was such a fool. Robert died suddenly last spring, heart attack at 62. One day he was complaining about chest pains, the next day he was gone. The grief nearly killed me. 35 years of marriage, and suddenly I was alone in that big house we'd built together, surrounded by memories and silence. Sarah came for the funeral, of course, looking beautiful in her black designer dress, dabbing at her eyes with a silk handkerchief. But even in my fog of grief, I noticed something cold in her eyes. Something calculating. The will reading was scheduled for 2 weeks after the funeral. I remember sitting in that attorney's office, my hands shaking as I twisted my wedding ring around my finger. The office smelled like leather and expensive cologne, and the lawyer, Mr. Peterson, sat behind this massive mahogany desk like some kind of judge. Sarah was there too, dressed in a sharp navy suit that probably cost more than I spent on clothes in a year. She kept checking her phone, tapping her manicured nails on the arm of her chair. I thought this would be simple. I thought Robert had left everything to me, maybe with some provision for Sarah's future. After all, I was his wife. I was the one who had stood by him through everything. I was the one who had sacrificed everything for our family. Mr. Peterson cleared his throat and began reading. To my beloved daughter Sarah, I leave the family home at 1247 Maple Street, along with all its contents and the sum of $2.3 million from my various accounts and investments. My heart stopped. Sarah's face lit up with this satisfied smile that made my stomach turn. But I thought, okay, maybe there's more. Maybe he's taking care of Sarah first, but there's something for me too. And to my wife Joyce, Mr. Peterson continued, I leave the property at 847 Bitter Creek Road. That was it. No money. No explanation. Just an address I didn't even recognize. I'm sorry, I said, my voice barely a whisper. There must be some mistake. What about the rest? What about me? Mr. Peterson looked uncomfortable. Ma'am, this is the complete will. The property at Bitter Creek Road is yours, along with any contents therein. What property? I was getting louder now, panic rising in my chest. I don't know what that is. What about our savings? What about the life insurance? What about our retirement accounts? Those were all in your husband's name alone, ma'am. They passed to the primary beneficiary listed in the will. Sarah finally looked up from her phone, and the expression on her face, God, it still makes me sick. It was pure satisfaction. Pure glee. Like she'd won some kind of contest I didn't even know we were playing. "Mom," she said, her voice dripping with fake sympathy, "I'm sure Daddy knew what he was doing. Maybe this property is special somehow." Special. I wanted to slap that smirk right off her face. I begged Mr. Peterson to double-check, to look for another will, to find some kind of mistake. But there wasn't one. Robert had left me an unknown property in the middle of nowhere while giving our daughter everything else. Everything I had helped build. Everything I had sacrificed for. As we left the office, Sarah put her hand on my shoulder, the first physical contact she'd had with me since the funeral. "Don't worry, Mom," she said. "I'm sure you'll figure something out." The next week was a nightmare. Sarah wasted no time asserting her ownership of my home, the house where I had raised her, where I had loved her father, where I had lived for 23 years. She showed up on Monday morning with a locksmith and some man in a suit who I later learned was her real estate agent. "I'm having the locks changed," she announced, not even looking at me as she directed the locksmith to the front door. "For security purposes." "Sarah, this is my home too." "Actually, Mom, it's not. It's my house now. You have until Saturday to get your things out." Saturday. 6 days to pack up a lifetime. Where am I supposed to go? I asked, hating how desperate I sounded. "You have that property Daddy left you," she said, examining her nails. I looked it up. It's about an hour outside town. Very rustic. Rustic. The way she said it, like it was something dirty. I tried calling some of our old friends, thinking maybe someone would let me stay with them while I figured things out. But Sarah had gotten there first. She'd been making calls, telling people I was having some mental health issues since Robert's death. She said I'd become erratic and unstable, and that the family was concerned for my well-being. By the time I called anyone, they either didn't answer or gave me these awkward, distant responses. "Joyce, honey, maybe you should think about getting some professional help," Martha from the church auxiliary told me. "Sarah says you've been having some difficulties adjusting." Difficulties adjusting. Like grief was some kind of character flaw. The packing was torture. Sarah stationed herself in the living room like some kind of prison guard, monitoring everything I put in boxes. When I tried to take the china set that had been my mother's, she stopped me. "Actually, Mom, that's part of the house contents. It stays here." "That was my mother's china, Sarah. She gave it to me when I got married. And now it's mine. The will says all contents of the house." I wanted to fight her. I wanted to scream and rage and demand my rights. But what rights did I have? The will was clear. The law was on her side. And I was just a broken-down 58-year-old woman with nowhere to go and no money to hire a lawyer. So I packed my clothes, my books, a few pieces of jewelry that weren't valuable enough for Sarah to care about, and some photographs. 35 years of life, reduced to a dozen cardboard boxes. On Saturday morning, Sarah was there bright and early to watch me load my boxes into my old Honda. She stood in the doorway of what used to be my home, arms crossed, wearing a silk robe that probably cost more than my car. "Drive safe, Mom," she called out as I pulled away. "Enjoy your new adventure." Adventure. I was being thrown out of my home by my own daughter, and she called it an adventure. The drive to 847 Bitter Creek Road took an hour and a half through increasingly desolate countryside. The road got narrower and more potholed the further I went. When I finally found the address, I almost drove past it. It barely looked like a structure at all. The shack, and I use that word because that's exactly what it was, sat on about 2 acres of overgrown scrubland. The roof was missing half its shingles, the front porch was sagging so badly it looked ready to collapse, and most of the windows were either cracked or boarded up. The paint, what little remained, was peeling off in long strips that fluttered in the wind like dead skin. I sat in my car for 20 minutes, staring at this place that was supposed to be my new home. This was what my husband thought I deserved. This was what 35 years of devotion had earned me. A shack in the middle of nowhere with no electricity, no running water, and walls that looked like they might fall down if I sneezed too hard. I cried then. Ugly, heaving sobs that shook my whole body. I cried for Robert, for the marriage I thought we'd had. I cried for Sarah, for the daughter I thought I'd raised. I cried for myself, for the woman who had given everything and gotten nothing in return. I cried until I had no tears left, until my chest ached and my eyes were swollen shut. But then, sitting there in that car with my whole life reduced to cardboard boxes in the back seat, something else started growing inside me. Something harder and sharper than grief. Anger. Pure, burning anger. How dare he? How dare Robert do this to me? How dare he reward our daughter's selfishness while punishing my loyalty? How dare he leave me to rot in this godforsaken place while she lived in luxury in the home I had helped build? And how dare Sarah? How dare she stand there and smirk while I lost everything? How dare she pretend to care while she twisted the knife? How dare she paint me as crazy to our friends just to cover up her own cruelty? I got out of that car and I walked up to that shack and I kicked the door so hard it flew open and banged against the wall. The sound echoed through the empty rooms like a gunshot. Fine. I screamed at the broken ceiling, at the moldy walls, at God or whoever was listening. You want me to live in dirt? Fine. But I'm not going down without a fight. The inside of the shack was even worse than the outside. The floorboards were warped and rotted, the walls were stained with what looked like decades of water damage, and there were holes in the roof big enough to throw a cat through. The smell was indescribable, mold and decay and something else, something sour and wrong. But it was mine. For better or worse, this dump was the only thing in the world that belonged to me now. I spent the first week living out of my car, going into town during the day to use public restrooms and buy supplies. I ate gas station sandwiches and slept in the back seat because the shack was uninhabitable. Every night, I would lie there staring up at the stars through my windshield, wondering how my life had gone so wrong. Meanwhile, Sarah was busy living it up in my old house. I heard through the grapevine, the few people who would still talk to me, that she'd already started redecorating. She threw out all my furniture, all my decorations, everything that reminded the world that I had ever lived there. She bought a new car, a red BMW convertible, and started throwing parties every weekend. The worst part was the stories she was spreading about me. According to Sarah, I had completely lost it after the will reading. She told people I had tried to attack Mr. Peterson when he read the will. She said I had been calling her at all hours, begging for money, threatening to hurt myself if she didn't help me. She painted me as some kind of unstable, desperate woman who needed to be avoided for everyone's safety. And people believed her. Why wouldn't they? She was young and beautiful and rich, and I was just a crazy old woman living in a shack. When I tried to defend myself, to tell people the truth, they looked at me with pity and fear. Poor Joyce, they thought. The grief has really gotten to her. It took me 2 weeks to get the electricity turned on in the shack, and another week to get a well drilled for water. Every dollar I spent was agony because I had so little money left. I was living on my small savings account and the part-time job I managed to get at a grocery store in town. After paying for basic utilities and food, I had maybe $50 left each month. But slowly, painfully, I started making the shack livable. I patched the holes in the roof with whatever materials I could afford. I scrubbed the mold off the walls with bleach until my hands were raw. I bought a used mattress and a card table and 2 folding chairs from a thrift store. It wasn't much, but it was shelter. The isolation was the hardest part. I had gone from being surrounded by friends and family to being completely alone. Sarah never called, never visited, never acknowledged my existence except to tell people how worried she was about my mental state. The friends who might have supported me had been poisoned against me by her lies. I was invisible, forgotten, erased from the life I had built. But I wasn't broken. Not completely. Every morning I got up and I fought another day. I went to work, I came home to my shack, I ate my simple dinner, and I planned. Because somewhere deep inside me, I knew this wasn't over. This couldn't be the end of my story. 1 month after moving into the shack, I was cleaning out what used to be a closet when I noticed something odd about the back wall. The floorboards didn't quite line up right, like there was something underneath them. I pried up the boards with a crowbar I'd bought for repairs, and underneath I found an old wooden chest, locked tight and covered in dust. My heart was pounding as I broke the lock with a hammer. Inside the chest were dozens of envelopes, legal documents, old deeds, and at the very top, a letter addressed to me in Robert's handwriting. "My dearest Joyce," it began. "If you are reading this, then my plan has worked, and you have found what I hoped you would find. I know the will must have hurt you terribly, and I am sorry for that pain. But I needed to know who Sarah really was, and I needed to ensure that you, the woman who sacrificed everything for our family, would ultimately be protected." I was shaking so hard I could barely hold the letter. Sarah has shown me her true nature over the past few years. Her coldness, her greed, her sense of entitlement. I knew that if I left her everything in a traditional way, she would squander it and leave you with nothing. So I gave her enough money to reveal her character, while leaving you what she would never think to value: this property. I looked around at the rotting walls and broken windows. What could possibly be valuable about this place? The documents in this chest will show you that this land sits on one of the largest undeveloped mineral deposits in the state. The surveys were completed just before my death. Josie, my love, you are sitting on a fortune that makes my insurance money look like pocket change. But more than that, you are sitting on your independence, your security, and your power. I couldn't breathe. I literally could not breathe. I know Sarah will try to destroy you socially and emotionally. I know she will paint you as crazy and desperate. But I also know you, my darling wife. I know your strength, your endurance, your ability to survive anything. You will endure, and when you do, you will win. Take these documents to a lawyer, not Peterson, who is paid to follow my instructions exactly, and claim what is rightfully yours. The letter was signed with all my love and faith in your strength, Robert. I sat on the floor of that broken-down shack, surrounded by legal documents and survey reports, and I laughed. I laughed until I cried, until my sides ached, until I couldn't tell if I was hysterical with relief or fury or both. Robert had known. He had known exactly what kind of person our daughter was, and he had set a trap for her. He had given her enough rope to hang herself while ensuring that I, the woman who had been loyal to the end, would ultimately inherit far more than she ever could. According to the documents in that chest, the mineral rights to this property were worth an estimated $12 million. $12 million. While Sarah was busy spending her inheritance on cars and parties and designer clothes, I was sitting on a fortune that would last me several lifetimes. But I wasn't ready to reveal this yet. Oh no. I had watched my daughter throw me away like garbage, and now I wanted to watch her destroy herself with her own greed and arrogance. The next few months were almost enjoyable. I quietly consulted with a new lawyer and a team of geologists who confirmed what the documents had revealed. The land was indeed incredibly valuable, and the mining rights were legally and indisputably mine. We began the process of selling those rights to a major mining company, but I insisted that everything be kept absolutely confidential until the deal was complete. Meanwhile, Sarah was making a beautiful mess of her life. She had quit her job within a month of getting her inheritance, claiming she didn't need to work anymore. She bought a bigger car, then a boat, then started investing in get-rich-quick schemes that any sensible person could see were scams. She was gambling in casinos, taking expensive vacations every few weeks, buying jewelry and clothes and artwork that she didn't understand or appreciate. People started talking. At first, they were envious of her sudden wealth. But as the months passed and her behavior became more erratic and wasteful, the tone changed. I heard whispers at the grocery store, saw the looks people gave her when she roared into town in her latest luxury car. The girl who had once been admired for her beauty and charm was now seen as a spoiled, reckless fool. And the money was running out faster than she realized. $2.3 million sounds like a lot, but when you're spending it like water, it disappears quickly. especially when you're making terrible investments and falling for every scam artist who comes along with a smooth pitch and a friendly smile. By month 6, Sarah was starting to look stressed. Her perfect hair wasn't quite so perfect anymore. Her designer clothes couldn't hide the way she was losing weight from anxiety. She started calling Robert's old business associates, trying to get loans or investment advice, but word had gotten around about her poor judgment. People were polite but distant. By month 8, she was in real trouble. She had taken out loans against the house to fund more investments that had gone bad. She owed money to people who weren't as patient as banks. She was drinking too much, staying out too late, making scenes in public that got back to everyone in our small town. And through it all, I said nothing. I worked my shifts at the grocery store, I lived in my gradually improving shack, and I waited. Because I knew what was coming. Month 10 brought the first cracks in Sarah's facade. She showed up at the grocery store where I worked, looking around nervously before approaching my register. She was wearing designer jeans and a silk blouse, but they hung on her like they belonged to someone else. Her face was gaunt, her eyes were shadowed, and her hands shook as she fumbled with her purse. "Mom," she said quietly, glancing around to make sure no one was listening. "Can we talk?" I really looked at her for the first time since the will reading. The entitled princess was gone. In her place was a frightened young woman who was finally beginning to understand that actions have consequences. "I'm working," I said simply. "I know, but I need to ask you something. Could we maybe talk after your shift?" I could see it cost her to ask. Sarah had never had to ask for anything in her life. Everything had always been given to her freely, without question, without conditions. Now she was learning what it felt like to need something from someone who might say no. "I'll be done at 6, I told her. "You can come by the house if you want." She winced when I called the shack the house, but she nodded. That evening, Sarah pulled up to my property in her BMW, which I noticed now had a dent in the front bumper and a scratch along one side. She sat in the car for a long time before getting out, like she was working up the courage to face me. When she finally came to the door, she looked around the shack with poorly concealed horror. I had managed to make it livable, even comfortable in a sparse way, but it was still obviously a far cry from the luxury she was used to. "Mom," she began, then stopped. She looked around again, as if seeing the place for the first time. "This is really where you've been living?" "This is my home," I said. "Your father left it to me." She flinched. "Right. About that. I've been thinking, maybe Daddy didn't really understand what he was doing when he wrote that will. Maybe he was sick or confused or maybe he knew exactly what he was doing." Sarah stared at me for a long moment. I could see her trying to read my expression, trying to figure out if I knew something she didn't. "Mom, I need to ask you for a favor," she said finally. "I'm having some cash flow issues right now. Some investments didn't work out the way I expected. I was wondering if maybe you could help me out. Just temporarily, of course. Just until I get back on my feet." The audacity of it took my breath away. This girl who had thrown me out of my own home, who had spread lies about my mental health, who had left me to live in poverty while she squandered millions, this girl was asking me for money. "Help you out how?" I asked. "Well, I was thinking maybe you could take out a loan against this property. I know it's not worth much, but you might be able to get something. Or maybe you have some savings left. I could pay you back with interest, of course." I looked at my daughter, this beautiful, selfish, desperate young woman, and I felt something I had never felt for her before. Contempt. Pure, cold contempt. "Sarah," I said slowly, "do you remember what you told me when I asked where I was supposed to go after you kicked me out of my home?" She shifted uncomfortably. I was upset. We were all upset. It was a difficult time. "You told me I had this place. You said it was rustic. You told me to enjoy my adventure." "Mom, And when I was loading my boxes into my car, when I was leaving the only home I'd known for 23 years, what did you say to me?" Her face was getting red. "I don't remember exactly. You said drive safe and enjoy your new adventure." You stood there in your silk robe and you smiled while you watched me lose everything. I know you're angry, but... And now you want me to mortgage my home, the home you dismissed as worthless, to bail you out of the mess you made with the money you inherited while I got nothing. It's not like that. Then what is it like, Sarah? Explain it to me. She was crying now, ugly tears that ruined her makeup and made her nose red. I made some mistakes, okay? I trusted the wrong people. I made some bad investments. But I'm still your daughter. Doesn't that mean anything to you? You were my daughter when you threw me out. You were my daughter when you told people I was crazy. You were my daughter when you stole my mother's china and called it yours. My voice was getting louder, all the rage I'd been holding back for months finally breaking free. Where was your family loyalty then? I was protecting Daddy's wishes. No, you were protecting your own greed. And now that your greed has gotten you in trouble, you want me to save you. Well, guess what, Sarah? I can't save you. I work at a grocery store making minimum wage. I live in a shack with holes in the roof. I eat mac and cheese for dinner 3 nights a week because that's all I can afford. I don't have any money to lend you because your father left me nothing. But even as I said it, I realized I was ready to play my cards. I was ready to end this game. However, I continued, my voice getting quiet and dangerous. I might be willing to help you under certain conditions. Her face lit up with hope and relief. Anything, Mom? I'll do anything. First, you will work for me. Not play at working, not supervise while others work. You will do manual labor. You will clean and cook and maintain this property with your own hands. No more manicures, no more spa days, no more sitting around giving orders. She looked horrified, but she nodded. Second, you will apologize. Not just to me, but to everyone you lied to about my mental health. You will call every single person you told that story to, and you will admit that you made it up to cover your own guilt. Mom, I can't. Then you can't have my help. She was quiet for a long moment. What else? You will treat me with respect. You will speak to me politely, you will listen when I talk, and you will never again dismiss me or my circumstances as unimportant. Okay. And finally, this will be a loan, not a gift. You will pay me back every penny with interest on a schedule we agree to. If you miss a payment, the entire amount becomes due immediately. Sarah was nodding frantically. Yes, of course. How much can you lend me? I smiled then. It wasn't a nice smile. I can lend you up to $8 million. The silence that followed was absolute. Sarah's mouth fell open, her eyes went wide, and all the color drained from her face. What? She whispered. You heard me. $8 million. That should be enough to get you out of debt and back on your feet, don't you think? But how? How do you have $8 million? You work at a grocery store. I walked over to the kitchen table where I had spread out some of the documents from Robert's chest. I picked up the mineral rights contract and handed it to her. Your father was a smart man, Sarah. Much smarter than either of us gave him credit for. When he left me this worthless property, he was really leaving me the most valuable gift he could give. These mineral rights are worth about $12 million. I've already sold most of them. Sarah read the document once, twice, 3 times, her face getting paler with each pass. This can't be real, she whispered. Oh, it's real. The mining company has already started preliminary operations on the back 40 acres. I've been living very quietly on my new fortune while watching you destroy yourself with your old one. But why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you say anything? And there it was. The question I'd been waiting months to answer. Because I wanted to see what kind of person you really were. I wanted to see if you would help your mother when she was down, or if you would kick her while she was already broken. I wanted to see if you had learned anything about loyalty, about family, about taking care of the people who love you. I took the document back from her shaking hands. You failed that test, Sarah. You failed it spectacularly. You threw me away like garbage and then danced on my grave. You spread lies about me to cover up your own cruelty. You lived in luxury while believing your mother was suffering in poverty, and you slept just fine at night. She was sobbing now, great heaving sobs that shook her whole body. But here's the thing, I continued. I'm not like you. I don't abandon family when they're in trouble, even when they deserve it. Even when they've earned their trouble through their own selfishness and stupidity. So I'm going to help you. But it's going to be on my terms, and you're going to learn what it means to work for something, to earn something, to be grateful for something. The next 6 months were the hardest of Sarah's life, and I'll admit, I enjoyed watching her struggle. True to her word, she showed up at my property every morning at 8 a.m. to work. I had her cleaning the outside of the shack, weeding the garden I'd planted, repairing fences, painting walls. Her manicured hands got calloused and dirty. Her designer clothes got ruined. Her perfect hair got sweaty and tangled. At first, she complained constantly. Everything was too hard, too dirty, too beneath her. But gradually, as the weeks passed and the work became routine, something changed in her. She started taking pride in what she accomplished. She started asking questions about how things worked instead of just assuming someone else would handle them. She started saying please and thank you without being reminded. The apologies were harder for her than the physical work. Calling our friends and relatives to admit she had lied about my mental health was humiliating for her. But she did it, one painful phone call at a time. Some people forgave her immediately, others were more skeptical, but gradually the truth spread through our community. People started treating me normally again, and Sarah had to live with the shame of what she had done. The real breakthrough came 4 months into her work period. Sarah had been helping me install new gutters on the shack when she suddenly stopped working and just looked at me. "Mom," she said quietly, "I need to tell you something." "What's that?" "I understand now. What I did to you, I mean. I understand how cruel it was. I kept working, but I was listening. When Daddy died, I was so scared about money, about the future, about taking care of myself. And when the lawyer read the will, I felt this huge relief that I was going to be okay. But I never thought about you. I never thought about what you were feeling or what you needed. I just assumed you'd figure it out somehow." She was crying again, but these tears were different from the desperate tears she'd shed months earlier. These tears were about something deeper than money or consequences. "I told myself you were crazy because it was easier than admitting I was being selfish. I spread those lies because I needed to believe I was the victim somehow, that you were the problem instead of me. And even when I saw you working at that grocery store, even when I knew you were living in this place with no money and no help, I didn't care. I was too busy enjoying my new life to think about what I had destroyed." I stopped working and looked at her. Really looked at her. For the first time in months, I saw my daughter instead of the selfish stranger she had become. "I don't know if you can ever forgive me," she continued. "I don't know if I deserve forgiveness. But I want you to know that I understand now what family is supposed to mean. And I understand that I failed you completely when you needed me most." I set down my tools and pulled her into a hug. She clung to me like a child, this grown woman who had finally learned what it meant to be sorry. "I love you, Sarah," I told her. "I've always loved you, even when I didn't like you very much. But love without respect isn't enough. Love without consideration isn't enough. I needed you to understand that before we could move forward." The formal apology came 2 weeks later at our annual family reunion. Sarah had asked me to invite everyone, aunts, uncles, cousins, family friends, everyone who had heard her lies about my mental health. She stood up in front of 30 people and told them the truth. She explained that she had lied about me to cover up her own guilt about the inheritance. She explained that I had never been unstable or dangerous or any of the things she had claimed. She took full responsibility for what she had done, and she asked for everyone's forgiveness, mine included. There wasn't a dry eye in the room when she finished. But more importantly, there was respect. For the first time in her life, Sarah had taken responsibility for her actions without making excuses or blaming someone else. She had faced the consequences of her choices with dignity and honesty. That night, after everyone had gone home, Sarah and I sat on the porch of my shack, which by then was looking more like a cozy cottage than a hovel, and talked like we hadn't talked since she was a little girl. "So what happens now?" she asked. "Now you've finished paying off your debts and start rebuilding your life," I told her. "But you do it with humility this time. You do it with respect for other people. You do it by working hard and being grateful for what you have instead of constantly wanting more. Will you help me? I mean, will you teach me how to do that?" "Sarah, I've been trying to teach you that your whole life. The question is whether you're finally ready to learn." 6 months later, I bought a beautiful house on the other side of town with some of my mineral rights money. It's not as big as the old family home, but it's mine, and it's filled with things I chose, things I love, things that make me happy. Sarah visits every Sunday for dinner, and she's building a life she can be proud of. She got a job at a nonprofit that helps struggling families, and she's good at it because she finally understands what struggle means. She's dating a teacher now, a good man who values kindness over money. She's paying me back the loan money exactly as scheduled, and she's never once complained about the terms. She's learned to cook, to clean, to take care of herself and others. She's become the woman I always hoped she could be. But here's the thing I want you to understand. This story isn't really about money or inheritance or even revenge. It's about what happens when you forget that love is supposed to be a circle, not a one-way street. For 35 years, I poured love into my family and assumed it would be returned when I needed it. When it wasn't, when I was thrown away like I didn't matter, it almost destroyed me. Robert's gift wasn't really the mineral rights or the money. His gift was the chance to learn my own worth, to discover my own strength, to find out that I could survive anything and come out stronger on the other side. He gave me the opportunity to see what I was really made of, and he gave Sarah the chance to learn who she really wanted to be. Sometimes the greatest treasure isn't what you're given, but what you endure long enough to uncover. Sometimes you have to lose everything before you can find out what really matters. And sometimes the people who hurt you the most are the ones who teach you the most about your own strength. Sarah learned that family isn't about what you can get from each other, but about what you're willing to give. She learned that love without loyalty is worthless, and that respect has to be earned every single day. She learned that when you throw people away, you throw away pieces of yourself too. And I learned that I am stronger than I ever imagined. I learned that I can survive betrayal, poverty, isolation, and abandonment. I learned that my worth isn't determined by how other people treat me, but by how I choose to respond to that treatment. I learned that sometimes the best revenge is simply refusing to be destroyed by the people who want to destroy you. But most importantly, I learned that it's never too late for people to change, to grow, to become better than they were. Sarah isn't the same person who threw me out of my home. She's learned humility, empathy, and genuine love. And I'm not the same person who allowed herself to be treated like she didn't matter. I've learned to value myself, to demand respect, and to set boundaries that protect my heart. We're both different now. We're both better. And that transformation, that growth, that hard-won wisdom, that's worth more than all the money in the world. So drop a comment with your city. I want to see how far this story travels. Because if there's one thing I've learned, it's that strength is contagious. When one person refuses to be broken, it gives others permission to be unbreakable too. And maybe, just maybe, my story will help someone else find their own buried treasure, the treasure of knowing their own worth.